Okay, geweldig. So yesterday we learned in the Mishnah all the different possible orders to do different things. So there's really 4 actions that could be taken that impact a zika. There's the obvious 2, yibum and chalitza, which impact the zika in a very significant way by completely eliminating it. Then there's the 2 derabbanandika actions that impact the zika, and we're going to soon see why. But those are get, which make it now usher. If one gives a get, it makes it usher for any of the brothers to make yibam on any of the almanas. And then there's Maamar. What Maamar does is also disallows any of the brothers from making yibam to anybody else, because it designates the Rabbanan that it's that couple that has to perform the yibam. The Mishnah went through what would happen if after get someone did Maamar or via, and after chalitza, after yibam, and after Maamar. So the first issue that the Gemara wants to tackle is, where do we even know? Why is it that the Rabbanan even made that a get or a Maamar or kedushin, which the Torah has no impact whatsoever on the zika? Why did the Rabbanan make it that they should impact the zika? Zok the Gemara. Atkan loy pligi elo beget achaget u'Maamar achamayim. The whole machlokes we have between Rav Gamliel and the Rabbanan is get after a get or Maamar after a Maamar. I will get echad b'Yevamos, Maamar echad b'Yevamos mahani. But if one gives a get, both the Rabbanan and Gamliel agree that no one can anymore make yibum. Thank you so much. And if one person makes Maamar, everybody agrees that no one else is allowed to do yibum. So everybody agrees that the Maamar and the get, which with the Rashi should have no impact whatsoever on the zika, have. Why would the Rabbanan do that? Mati, thanks somebody.
Isn't zika itself a Rabbanan construct? We don't see the concept in the Torah.
Well, what you really mean is the impact of zika. Zika is there. You have the fact that you have to make yibum on this woman or chalitza tells us that there's a relationship there. What's up for discussion is how much of an impact that relationship has. Does it answer a choisu kukase? Does it answer aims at kukase? And if it does it answer it even when the Yevamos dies or not?
But zika is just a presumption. We don't see it. We don't see it explicitly in the Torah.
Correct. I mean, well, you see it explicitly because why would a chalitza be necessary? Obviously, there has to be some type of severance. The only place where you see the zika actually impacts a halacha d'oraisa is when it comes to a forest and darim. A husband is allowed to be made for the darim of his wife, and a yovim. There's the child under what conditions, but under certain conditions, we learned that a yavam could be made for the darim of a yavama. That has to be d'oraisa, because the Rabban can't eliminate her nether. Hafara has to work with d'oraisa. So that's the only place you find where the zika actually has an impact on the d'oraisa, and I'm not sure where that's learned from. So let's see the Gemara. My time Omer Rabbanan get b'Yevamos mahani. Why did the Rabbanan say that if you give a get, if any one of the brothers gives a get to any one of the wives, no one could make yibum anymore? Zok Gemara, the reason is as follows: Mishum de mahani ba'alma. By a normal marriage, get is the way to sever that relationship, and therefore the Rabbanan felt that it's important that get should also, at least midrabanan, sever the zika. Why? The Amit Loi Mahani. If you're going to say that it doesn't work, the following mistake could occur. Amri people will say, get loitzia. Get is something that normally frees a woman from the relationship of a marriage. The chalitza loitzia. And chalitza is what's freeing a woman from the relationship of a zika. Umi de get loy mahani. If a get doesn't work for a zika, which in their mind is the ultimate way of severing a relationship, then maybe chalitza nami loy mahani. A chalitza doesn't either really sever any type of relationship. And what might happen is, someone might see that chalitza was done, but still think that yibum could be done. Because if get doesn't work, so there is no way to sever a zika relationship. And maybe chalitza doesn't work either. And then they'll make bia on a woman after chalitza was done, which we know is an Israelav, kivin loibana shov loyib. So in order to avoid something like that from occurring, the Rabbanan also made it that get should have an impact on the zika, or at least we should behave that way. We should paskin that way, and therefore, people will realize that get helps and chalitza helps, and therefore they will know that they cannot make yibum once either a get is given or a chalitza. So it's a pretty simple reason. Umay time Amar Rabbanan Maamar b'Yevamos mahani, and why do they say that Maamar helps? Zok to Gemara, because mishum the mahani ba'al, because kedushin helps by a normal woman when you make a kedushin on a woman. The yarmut loy mahani, and if you're not going to say that kedushin, which in the people's eyes is the ultimate way of creating a bond, if we would say, if we would leave it on the deraisa, that Maamar has no impact on the Yevama, people will mistakenly say, Amri Maamar liknais. Maamar is to make a kinyan in a woman. Ubia liknais. And the bia by Yibam also makes a kinyan. And bia works by kedushin as well. Umi the Maamar loy mahani. If Maamar wouldn't have any impact on the zika, well then maybe bia nami loy mahani. If someone did bia, it wouldn't either work. And what might happen is va'asla mivel achar bia. If one brother does yibum on one woman, he might go, the same brother or another brother might go and do yibum on the second almana from that husband, because they'll think that the bia of yibum doesn't have an impact. Because if kedushin doesn't have an impact, then maybe there's no way to sever the zika just by taking in one of the women. So because of that, they made it that if someone does Maamar or if someone gives a get, it will have an impact on the zika. But once again, it's only a midrabanan impact. It's not a midrastic impact. Okay. Now we're up to the next stage. Umaitam Amar Rabbanan biyapsula yesh acharea klum. Why is it that Rabban said that a biyapsula has acharea klum, which is one of the halachos in our Mishnah, and Rashi tells us, what does it mean? So I'm down in Rashi about 7 lines down from the Rashi's where the Gemara starts. My time Amar Rabban biyapsula yesh acharea zikas yavam. A bia psula, there's still a zikas yavaman. We learned that if someone does bia when there was already an isser derabanan to do the bia, for instance, someone gave a get to his yavaman, midaraisa that has 0 impact, and you could still do ibum. Midarabanan, they said you could no longer do ibum because you gave her a get already, and now you made ibum. So midaraisa, that's a perfectly good ibum. Midarabanan, it's not a good ibum. Yet after that yibum is done, a chalitza is still required. So, like we learned in our Mishnah, Maamar bezu, he did Maamar to one of the almanas. At that point, once he did Maamar to one of the almanas, he's no longer allowed to be boil another one of the almanas. Yet he illegally did it. Illegally only midrabanan, but midaraisa, the Maamar has 0 impact. And the bia that he made is evil. But nevertheless, that bia is possible because he made Maamar to another of the women first. The Mishnah said both women need a get, v'chalitza, and they still need chalitza. Why would you need chalitza if midaraisa it's a perfectly good yibum? Tiski labailas bia beget. The bailas bia, who midaraisa was nikna to the yavam because a bia was done. So why can't he just give a get? Beloy chalitza, without chalitza. The tifter av chaverto. And even the woman who did Maamar on should also be able to go free, and her zika should be eliminated. The via saw, because the other woman had via, which would have broken the zika. So she shouldn't need chalitza. Why did the Rabban say that after a bia was done, you still need to make chalitza if midrabanan that bia was inappropriate? Zokt Gemara Amri as follows: people would mistakenly say, "Achar get." If we're going to say that a bia that was already also to do midrabanan works, well, then gzeira bia achar get mishum bia achar chalitza. Then they're going to say, just like a bia after a get no longer needs chalitza, and now it's considered fully married, and the way to end such a relationship would be with another get. Well, then maybe if someone made bia after chalitza, that would be the same thing. When not only is it not a good bia, it's an issue d'Rabbanan. I'm sorry, it's an issue d'Oraisa of Shuv L'Yivna. So that's why they said that a bia psula needs chalitza. Okay, the bia acher maimeri, and if the bia psula that we're referring to is a bia that was done after Maamar was done, so he did Maamar to one almana, and then he did bia to another almana. Well, again, bia acher Maamar, we're worried that would be a problem. Mishum bia acher bia. We're afraid that just like we're saying that if someone does a bia after Maamar, it's a good bia and it's kind of the Yevamos. Who adin if someone did bia after another bia? So he was ba on one of the almanas, you could still be ba on the other one of the almanas. Because if you could do it after kedushin, why can't you do it after bia? So that's why they said that bia will require a chalitza. My time amur abanan, hi chalitza psula, eina chareklum. So why didn't they make the same gzera when it comes to chalitza? If there's a chalitza psula, meaning if chalitza was done on a woman who you couldn't have done yibum to anyway. So take a case where someone gave a get to one of the wives, so you can no longer make yibum on any of the wives. Once you do chalitza, we say that's fine, and no matter what happens after that, we're not worried. Why is that? Why aren't we worried after a chalitza as well? Zaktimara, very simple. Amri my ligzar. What could possibly be a potential problem? Nigzar chalitza acher haget. Mishum chalitza acher chalitza. Are you worried that if we say chalitza after the get is a good chalitza and nothing else is required, well, people are going to say that after chalitza nothing else is required? That's not a problem. Kol hani tachlach v'tezel. If someone wants to make extra chalitzas, let them make extra chalitzas. There's no damage done. Bias we want to avoid if it's going to be a bia of an Isser. But if we're worried that if someone says, oh, if you do it, you have to do chalitza after a get, maybe I have to do chalitza after a chalitza. So do another chalitza. There's no harm done if an extra chalitza is done. So the reason why we require a chalitza after a get, because a get didn't break the zika. So if you give a get to one of the amanis, there's still a zika there. You still have to do the chalitza. So we're afraid that after a chalitza, people will say the same thing. It's a big deal. So someone's going to end up giving an extra chalitza. It doesn't concern them. Okay. How about chalitza after Maamar? Right?
Why isn't it Baal Tosef? You have a mitzvah to do chalitza once. You keep doing it forever and ever.
Well, here's my answer. The Yitzhahara, Victor doesn't get involved in doing extra chalitzas. The Yitzhahara gets involved in doing extra.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Ligzar chalitza acher Maamar. So now let's look at another case where there's a chalitza psula. And again, the chalitza psula means midrabanan. It's possible because you didn't have the option at that time to do a yibum. So ligzar chalitza acher Maamar. Mishum chalitza acher bia. Should you because your chalitza acher Maamar mishum chalitza acher bia, meaning that if we allow chalitza after Maamar, and say that severs everything, well then we'll also say that chalitza works after bia. Meaning, if someone makes bia and makes a yibum, you don't need a get. you need chalitza to sever that relationship. And that there will be a problem of a woman going free with chalitza. When a woman, once Yibum is done, needs a proper get. Atu chalitza achemaimer. So the Gemara, atu chalitza achemaimer, me loy boy get the maimer, right? You wouldn't have such a concern. Because if you did chalitza after maimer, we learned that whenever there's a maimer done, the chalitza alone will only discharge the zika. But you always need a get for the maimer anyway. So no one would think that chalitza after bia wouldn't need anything. They would think you need a get as well, because after mimer you need a get. Okay, chalitza after bia nami boy get leviasan. So just like after mimer, we're going to mandate a get as well in addition to the chalitza. So too, people would say that you can do chalitza after the bia and chanami, but you also need a get, so that there won't be a concern that someone who's married to the Yavam, fully married, will now leave the Yavam without a get. Amar Rav, Zok Rav, my time with Rabbi Gamliel. So now that we got the basics covered, why the Rabbanan make it that get should have an impact, and chalitza should have an impact, and enach chalitza klum, it's all grounded in simple concerns. Now we have to focus on the first part of the Mishnah, where there's a machloikis between Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanon, if you hold of get acher get and maimer acher maimer. So Zok the Gemara, my time with the Rabbi Gamliel. So the case where they're arguing is, if there's two Yevamos, for instance, there's two Yevamos, two almanas, and the person who does who's supposed to do ibum gave a get to Yevama A, and then turned around and gave a get to Yevama B. So Zok Rabbi Gamliel that the Karovim of Yevama A, who he gave a get to, are now usher to him. But the Karovim of Yevama B are not usher to him, because the get that he gave to Yevama B had zero impact. And the Rabbanan held that no, even the Karovim of Yevama B, who he gave a get to, second, he's usher to them as well. So what's the svara from Gamliel? Why the get acher get, the second get, has zero impact? Zok the Gemara in the Havamina, the misafkalei get idachi iloi dachi. He has a suffix if the get is doicha. So when the Rabbanan set up that get has an impact, did they set it up that it should completely wipe out the zika, or if it doesn't wipe out the zika at all? It's an all or nothing suffix that Rabbi Gamliel has. Maimer, ikani, iloikani. He has the same question with Maimer. Is it koine completely or not? So therefore, get. Let's go back to get. I dachi, iloi dachi. So let's think about it. I kama dachi. If the get had a full impact midrabana on the first Yevama, on Yevama A, when he gave her the get, well then there's no zika anymore. If there's no zika anymore, basra maika of it. When he gave the get to the Almana B, it's like he gave a get to anybody on the street who he was never married to. So it shouldn't have any impact on Almana B. And the Kamaloi Dachi, and if you're going to say that the get of the first, the get to Almana A had no impact, well, if the get to Almana A had no impact, Basra Nami Loi Dachi. So too, it won't, if it didn't have an impact on the first woman, it won't have an impact on the second one. Maimer, we have the same question with Maimer. Ikani Ilaikani. Ikamakan, if it created a complete connection between him and Almana A, which would now break the Zika to everybody else, then Basra might cover it. If he tries to make Maimer on the second woman, that's Achos Ishtoi, it won't be Chal at all. It would have no impact at all. Vikama Loikani, and if Maimer didn't work for the first wife, for Almana A, Basra Lami Loikani. Why would it have any more impact on the second woman than on the first woman? Mm-hmm. So basically, it's a suffix how the Rabbanan set up the intensity of what a get would do, and how the Rabbanan set up the intensity of what Maimer would do. So the obvious question on this sugya is, and I mentioned it yesterday earlier on the Mishnah, but I didn't mention it in the morning, so I'm going to mention it again, is get and Maimer is only the Rabbanan, right? So if you have a suffix how it works. So why do you say that it has an impact on the first wife and it asks anybody? Why didn't you say Savik Rabban Lakula? Say Savik Rabban Lakula and get maybe doesn't impact anybody. You go completely Lakula. So if he gives a get to a woman, he should be mutter to her, even by Almana A. He should be mutter to her krivis, because maybe the get has no impact. If it's a suffix, if the get has an impact, why don't you say Savik Rabban Lakula? That's what some of the Rishonim ask on this one. So there's a couple of terutzim that are offered. One of the Rishonim answer very simply. Savik Rabban Lakula is if we know the halacha and we have a suffix, what happened over here? Well, then you go Savik Rabban Lakula. But if you don't know what somebody said, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, I don't know what the Rabban Regoizer, that's not a suffix, that's a lack of knowledge. You don't know the halacha. You don't say Savik Rabban Lakula when you don't know what was told to you. If you have a suffix, if your Rebbe was matter something or asked something, that's not a Savik Rabban Lakula, that's a lack of information. And there you don't say Savik Rabban Lakula. However, there's other interesting terutzim that are offered to this shaila of Savik Rabban Lakula. The Gemara in Arvei Psochim discusses if you need a seba by the Dalat Kaisos. And the Gemara brings a machlokes. Do you need a seba by the first two Kaisos? Because that's the progress, that's the process of us going Mishibud L'Geula. Or do you need a seba by the last two Kaisos? Because by the last two Kaisos, we were already in a matzav of Geula. So what is the focus? The Haseba is required during the process of becoming free, or the Haseba applies when we're already free. And the Gemara says, we don't know. We don't know if the Haseba should be on the first two kaisos or on the last two kaisos. We do a Haseba on all four kaisos. So you can ask the same question. Why don't you say, Savik Rabbanan Lakula? The Arba kaisos are only Midrabanan. So the Ran says, a very simple svar, the Ran says, if Al Yidei Savik Rabbanan Lakula, you're going to wipe out the whole halacha to begin with. There'll be no Haseba on any of the kaisos. There, you don't say Savik Rabbanan Lakula. So that would apply here as well. If you would say Savik Rabbanan Lakula, then the whole Gezer of get having any impact on the Zika would be butler. This is also relevant in Mikra Megillah. The halacha is, if you don't know if a city is Makavas Chayma, Mimosh Yeshua Banin or not, you have to lay both on Yidal and Tesvav. Well, why don't you say on Yidal Savik Rabbanan Lakula and on Tesvav Savik Rabbanan Lakula? The teretz is, well, once again, then you're going to be totally mevatel the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. Okay, so this was just a havamina of how the Gemara understood Rabbi Gamliel. But now the Gemara asks a kasha on this assumption. Eisvei Abaye. The Mishnah says, "Umoydi Rabbi Gamliel sheyeshket acher maimer." I believe this is a brayso, not a Mishnah. Umoydi Rabbi Gamliel sheyeshket acher maimer umaimer acher get. Rabbi Gamliel is moida that you have get after maimer and you can have maimer after a get, and you can have get acher bia. Umaimer, the get acher bia umaimer. You can have a get after bia and maimer was already done, and you can have maimer acher bia v'get after bia and get was done. So let's just focus. There's four cases here. Let's focus on one of the cases just to make it clear. The get achar bia umayim. So if someone did mimer to one woman, right? So that now makes it usher for him to do bia on any other woman, midrabanan. Then someone went and did bia on another woman. So the brother, the Yavim did mimer on almana A, and then he did bia on almana B. Right? And then he gave a get. So Rabbi Gamliel is moida that the get has an impact. So frek the Gemara, the misafkele the Rabbi Gamliel, if there's a suffix to Rabbi Gamliel, if the get has any impact, or if the mimer has any impact, well, to have a kebia the lechatchila. So let's drill down a little bit more into the case of. Let's drill a little bit into the case of Maimer Acher B of a get. Get Lazu. So once again, he gave a get to Almana A, Ubal Lazu, and then he was boiled wrongfully Almana B, Umaimer Lishlishis, and then he did Maimer to Almana C. So the halacha is Midairaisa, that mimer shouldn't be koina because he already did bia to one of the other almanos, and now she's fully married to him midairaisa. But midarabanan, we do give validity to that mimer, koina mimer, which we can get that mimer, which midaraisa we shouldn't consider at all. Zokt Rabbi Gamliel, we do consider that mimer, and we look at it like she's married, even though she's already married to the, even though the Yavam already did bia on another one of the Yevamos, but the mimer that he did afterwards to a third almana is valid midrabanan, and it will require a get. And even after the get, this Yavam will be also on all the relatives of this third wife. So that means we consider it like the mimer worked, even though there was a bia done. So Frek the Gemara, the Amrit, if you're going to say that the whole thing is only a suffix, it's all about a suffix, so then to have a kabiyah de lechatchila, if it's only a suffix, if the mimer was kind of, right? So on the side that the mimer wasn't kind of, I'm sorry, the get came first, bia came second, mimer came third. So it's a suffix if the get messed up the zika, right? If the get did not mess up the zika, let's say the time the get had no impact. On the time that the get had no impact, then the bia is a kosher bia. I'm sorry, and then the mimer should be nothing. So if it takes me to have a kabiyah, the lechatchila, so much. If the get completely wipes out the zika, right? Well, then the mimer should be nothing as well. And if the get did not wipe out the zika, then the bia would have been as if he did the bia at first, which would have been a deraisa de kosher bia, and then the technique, and therefore it would be completely kani. And then afterwards, the later mimer shouldn't work. So the later mimer shouldn't work for Monashich if it's based on the suffix, because no matter which side of the suffix you go, either way, the mimer shouldn't work. If the get worked 100%, well then surely the mimer afterwards cannot work. And if the get 100% didn't work, well then his bia was a good yibum, and again the mimer at that shouldn't work. So if the whole thing is based on the suffix, if get works fully or doesn't work at all, this case will not make sense. So that's not we learned. Haba'ila, bia. This we learned in our Mishnah. If the bia was done first, before there was any things making it usher, such as a get or a mimer, then then we said it's kali and gansin, and any mimer done later would have absolutely no impact on anything. But the fact of the matter is, that the Mishnah does say, the Brisa does say, that if get was given first, then there was bia, and then there was mimer, that mimer still has an impact, and if it's a suffix, whether or not the get was a good get or not, regardless, the mimer should not have an impact. Therefore, says Abaye, we have to abandon our pshat in Rabbi Gamliel and move on to a different pshat. We have to the get, the dachi. Rabbi Gamliel holds it's not a suffix. What the Rabbanan said, 100% we know that the Rabbanan said that the get is doichem, and u'maimer the kan, and they said that maimer midrabanan for sure is kanya in this yevama. Miu, amar Rabbanan, ha yevama bechatzad mahani ba get ubechatzad mahani ba maimer. You separate a woman into pieces. The get impacts part of her, so the zika has sections to it, and the get would have impacted part of her, but not all of her. So there's room in her zika for the later mimer to have an impact. So therefore, it's possible, it's not a suffix anymore, it's possible for both a get and a mimer to have an impact. However, get acher get loy, even though the get leaves part of her available for mimer, the get wouldn't leave any part of the get section. So it's as if, figuratively, every zika has in it a get section and a mimer section. The get section was fully saturated with the first get. So therefore, the second get will have no room to be chal on this zika because its get department ran out of seats. There's no more place in it. But there's plenty of room in the mimer department, in the mimer section. So therefore, I never saw such a lumdish Gemara. Usually this is the type of lumdus that you hear from a Chaim. Here the Gemara itself is engaging in like mamish, making a lumdus and cutting the zik into pieces. So nachama, it has a get section. This zik has a get section, and it has a mimer section. Get acher get loy dachi. You know why? Because once one of them gave a get, it took up the entire get section. And Maamar after Maamar doesn't work, because the Maamar section has been fully booked. But get achar Maamar, Maamar achar get, that will work. Because high milsa kadachi, the get is doicha, the get section of the zika. The high milsa kakani. And the Maamar section is going to be nickness with the Maamar. But the get and the Maamar are two different sections of the zika, and one doesn't have an impact on the other. So it's mamish, a real shtickle bris Columbus in the Gemara itself. So let's see Rashi. Ella, Pshita, lay, the get dachi ksas, umaymar kani ksas. Rabbi Gamliel holds for sure when the Rabbanan set up the parameters of get, it's not completely doicha, it's doicha only the get section. And the Maamar only does Maamar on the Maamar section. Hilchach, bia, shalach and therefore the bia that was done after either a get or a Maamar, einat chila. It's no longer considered like bia was done before anything was done. Because either the get was done and it's for sure impacting the get part of the woman, or the Maamar was done, which for sure impacts the Maamar part of the woman, and now when the bia was done, it was already done in a compromised state. Umiyu, my time of yesh Maamar achar get achar Maamar, why is there room for the Maamar to work on a woman who already got a get, and vice versa? That the ain't Maamar achar Maamar, but there is no room for Maamar to be chal after the Maamar. Well, get achar get is because the Amar Rabbanon, the chad tzad, mahani baget, litchois, chetzia, in one section of this woman, of the zika of this woman, get has an impact to push away half of her. The chad tzad mahani b'maimer lichnos chetzia, and the other half of her, she could be makabel the kedusha, the maimer. Get achar get loidachi. The reason why get achar get is loidachi, tadachi lakama, because the get section is fully occupied. Kol koyach get, hilchach lav klumu. Therefore, the second get has no impact. Umuter b'kroy v'isel, and therefore he's mutter in the relations of the woman of Almana A, of Almana B, who he gave the get to, because the get given to Almana B had no room to be chal on her. So this is a mamish ashtik alumbus. Zok the Gemara. V'Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan hold? They hold, because they hold get achar get. So they hold kol chad v'chad takinu le Rabbanan get umaymar. Each one could have a full get and a full Maamar. The Yevamos. So Zok Rashi to give it more clarity. Rabban the Palag, the Pligel Gamliel. The Amar Yesh get achar get. Amar Lach, they'll tell you that Kol Chad V'Chad Min HaYevamim, each one of these Yevamim, Tiknu Le Rabbanon get Umaymar B'Chol Yevamos. So you don't split it up by the woman. You look at the men and the woman. Each man has a place in each woman to put his get, and each man has a place in each woman to do a Maamar. So therefore, my Maamar has room. If just because you did Maamar on Almana A, there's still a section for my Maamar. So Rabbi Yehuda learned that any one of the Yevamim takes up the full Maamar section and the full get section with his Maamar or with his get. Rabban knows no. The sections are further split down by Yavam. Everybody has a reserved seat. Every one of the men have a reserved Maamar section in each woman, and every one of the men has a reserved get section in each woman. So therefore, you can't say the first Yavam who gave the first Yevama a get left no other capacity for anyone else to give a get. He only took up his section. The Kama Kol Koyach get the day, the Islay B'Hach Yevama Hu Dedacha. The first Yavam was only able to occupy his reserved get section. Aval koyach get the chavabach Yevama, but the koyach get the get section for Yavam B, he had no occupation of. So basically, there's a whole bunch of seats in her Zika stadium. There's a get section and there's a Maamar section, and in each section there's a special seat for each one of the Yevamim. So you can occupy your Maamar seat, but you can't occupy my Maamar seat. You can occupy your Maamar, your get seat, and I can occupy my get seat. The koyach gita today, it's a rasal leidacha b'chini Maamar, and the same thing in each woman there's a seat. So therefore, just because I gave a get Almana A, there's still room in the get section, in my personal get section, in Almana B for my get. Therefore, the Rabbanan said that everyone's get and everyone's mimer in every Almana has an impact. So Zok Gemara, Rabbanan kol chad v'chad, takin Rabbanan get u'mimer b'yavama. Period. Now let's look at the status of the bia that was done after a get, or a bia that was done after a mimer, which we call a bia psula. Zok Gemara, if I bia psula, in some ways it's adifa mi mimer, in some ways it's stronger than a mimer, ugriya mi mimer, and in some ways a bia psula is less than mimer. Why? Adifa mi mimer. In what way is a bia psula better than mimer? The mimer ache mimer loy mahani. According to Rabbi Gamliel, going back to Rabbi Gamliel, a mimer after mimer loy mahani, because a woman's mimer section is totally occupied. You cannot. No one else could make mimer on her. However, bilu bia ache mimer. But if someone did bia ache mimer mahani, it does have an impact, right? And because of that, you need to give a get. So in that way, you see that the koyach of bia is stronger than the koyach of mimer, because mimer ache mimer would have zero impact, yet bia after mimer would have an impact. In that respect, bia is stronger than mimer. However, agreeing with mimer, according to Gamliel, in a certain way, bia is weaker than mimer. The mimer acher get kani lechula sheyura de get. According to Rabbi Gamliel, if someone gave a get, that only occupied the get section. So if he did a mimer after that, the mimer would have an impact. Bilu bia acher get, but if someone did bia after a get, it would not be kind of the shir to get, and that's why it will still need a chalitza on the get section. So you see, bia in some ways is stronger than mimer, and in some ways it's weaker than mimer. Okay, now that we got through this, we're past the complicated section. But at the end of the day, the machlokes Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanan is how many sections and seats are there in everyone's zikah. According to Rabbi Gamliel, each woman has one seat for zika, one seat for get, and one seat for mimer. And once that gets occupied, it's occupied. However, according to the Rabbanan, every yavam has a seat in every yavama, sai for get and sai for mimer. Tan Rabbanan, Ketzad Amar Rabbi Gamliel ein get achaget. What is an example of Rabbi Gamliel when he said ein get achaget? So you have shtei yavamas shenaflu fil yavamech. Two yavamas fell in front of one yavam. So Almana A and Almana B. V'nosan get lazu, we get lazu, and the yavam gave a get to Almana A, and he gave a get to Almana B. Rabbi Gamliel Omer chayles lo yishayna. He does chalitza to the Almana A, but also b'krov yisel, and now he'll be usher to all of her relatives because of achosh chalutzasai and aim chalutzasai and any other of the relatives of chalutzasai, just like he would be usher to the krivis of a real wife. Umutter b'krayvis shnia, and she would be mutter on the krayvis of the second one. The chachamim nosen get lazu v'get lazu usher b'krayvis shtein. Both of the gittin have an impact. One on Almana A, one on Almana B, and they're both going to be usher. And then the chalitza la'achas men. You only need chalitza to one of them. The chinat ha'omer b'shnei yavamin v'yavam achas, and the same thing would apply if there were two men and only one almana. Ketzad Amar Rabbi Gamliel ein maimer achamayim. What's an example of Rabbi Gamliel or Gamliel's halacha of ein maimer achamayim? Again, shtei yavamin shenafel f'yam achas is almana A and almana B. V'asa maimer bezu and maimer bezu. And then the yavam made kedushin, made a maimer in almana A, and then he made a kedushin in almana B. Rabbi Gamliel aimer nois and getler rishayna. You give a get to the first one. The chaylas time, then you give a chalitza. The usher b'krayvis, and he's not allowed to have a relation with any of her krayvis because it's the krayvis of his chalutza. But it is mutter. It is mutter to have relations with the krayvis of the shnia because the shnia didn't do chalitza, and the shnia, his mimer, has zero impact. You have to give him both a get because the mimer did have an impact on both of them. But nevertheless, and the same thing would apply if there was two brothers to do yibum and there was only one yibum. So Maamar, you give a get to each one. You do chalitza to the first, Umuter b'kroiva shnia. Fragt the Gemara, this psak that Rabbi Gamliel just said, leimat havatiyov to the Shmuel. This is inconsistent with a Shmuel that we once had. And this Shmuel we once had, on Daf Chav Zayin, the Amar Shmuel, chalas lebalas haget, le'nifter atzara. If, what was Shmuel's case was when there were two Yevamos, Rashi Naflu Lefanu Shtei Yevamos, so there's Almana A and Almana B, and you gave a get to Almana A, and then you gave Chalitza to Almana A. The Allah is Shmuel Le'nifter atzara. You still have to give Chalitza to Almana B. You did Chalitza to Almana A. The Chalitza that you did to Almana A was a compromised Chalitza. Why was it a compromised Chalitza? Because you couldn't have done Yibam to that Almana at that point, because you already gave her a get. So that makes your Chalitza compromised. And Shmuel held, in a case of a compromised Chalitza, you cannot give one woman Chalitza like you normally would. Rather, you need to give Chalitza to each of the Almanas independently. Yet, we just learned in Rabbi Gamliel that even though it was a compromised Chalitza, the one Chalitza is enough to pater everybody. Why don't you need to give a Chalitza to each one individually? Amalach Shmuel, ki amri yana, ali b'demand amri yesika. Shmuel said, my halacha only goes according to the mandamar yesika. And like David Dalty brought up earlier, yesika is not a subject of machlokes. Everybody believes there's some type of a relationship. The question is how strong that relationship is. So Shmuel holds the relationship with Zika is strong enough that in a compromised chalitza, you would need a chalitza for each of the almonas individually. But for Gamliel Tavar ain't Zika. And Gamliel Zika is not so strong. And therefore, the one weakened chalitza will have an impact on all the other women. Zok to Gemara, Umidir Gamliel Tavar ain't Zika. Since we're saying that Rabbi Gamliel holds ain't Zika, shouldn't that also tell us that there are abundance of yesh Zika? Now, this is a very hard statement to understand because this has absolutely nothing to do with the machlokes Rabbanan and Rabbi Gamliel. The machlokes Rabbanan and Gamliel is all about how many seats there are in each stadium in the get side, in the Maamar side. It has nothing to do with yesh Zika or ain't Zika. So why is the Gemara now assuming that Rabbanan holds yesh Zika? Zok Rashi for no reason. The Gemara is just suggesting since they're arguing, so maybe they're arguing in this as well. A very shvacha correlation. The Ramban has a whole lump. This is why you might be totally zebazeh. But Rashi just saying the chihechi, the pligi Rabbanan, Rabbi Gamliel, get that maybe pligi bezika as well. The alpha gab the mino sayil sheminule. Even though from their machlokes there's nothing to do with the shail of yesika or ezik. But the Gemara now wants to assume that the Rabbanan hold yesika. Dikatani seva and says the seva the chinat aimer v'shnei yavamin v'yavam achas. If there were two Yevamos and one, and there were two men and only one Almana. What is the case there? Rashi says that if Sai, brother A, as well as brother B, gave a get to the same Almana A, because only one Almana, nevertheless, only one of them has to give Chalitza. That will be enough. This should be inconsistent with what Rabbi Bar Huna said in the name of Rav. Amar Rav, Chalitza psula. If you have a Chalitza psula, and once again, a Chalitza psula is a Chalitza done in a case where Yibum couldn't have been done. In this case, since both brothers already gave a get, Yibum could not have been done. So the Chalitza is a Chalitza psula. It's not enough if only one brother does Chalitza now. Now all the brothers have to do Chalitza. So if the Rabbanan hold Yesh Zika, why is it that only one of the brothers have to do chalitza? Why don't you make all the brothers do chalitza? Because Rav said that when you have a weekend chalitza, every brother has to do the chalitza. Amalach Rabbi Bar Huna, Bein Rabbi Gamliel, Bein Rabbanan Savri ain't Zika. The Rabbanan also ain't Zika. So therefore, it's not kasha. The hacha beget achar get u'maimer achamaimer kamipuli. The only machlokes in our Mishnah between Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanan is like we identified. Do you say get achar get? Do you say maimer achamaimer or not? Period. Maamar. Also Maamar bezu, Maamar bezu. What if you did Maamar on to Almana A and Almana B? Rabbi Gamliel says, Noisin get l'rishoina. You gave a get to the first one, and then you do chalitza on her. And you're no longer allowed to have relations with any of her relatives. It's a choish chalutasoi or aishes or aim chalutasoi or whatever. Umuter b'kroy v'shnia. But the second Almana B, he has nothing to do with, and therefore he is allowed to have relations with any of her relatives. If If Rabbi Gamliel holds in Maimer Acher Maimer, will then Rishonim Nami Tisyabe. Let's look at what happened. He gave Maimer to Almana A. The Alman, then he did Maimer to Almana B. We're saying the Maimer to Almana B has zero impact. So if it has zero impact, why can't he do Yibam on Almana A? If he did a Maimer on Almana A, and then he did Maimer on Almana B, let him go now do Yibam on Almana A. Why do we have to say that he has to give them both a get? And Chalitza, let him do Yibam on Almana A. So Gemara, the reason why we don't let him do Yibam on Almana A is Gzeira Dilma Asi Lebum Lashnia. He might not realize if we let him do Yibam on Almana A, he might think that he has a choice, that he can do Yibam on any one of the two women that he did Maimer on. When in fact he's only allowed to do Yibam on Almana A, therefore we don't let him do Yibam at all. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Gamliel Ubei Shammai, Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, Rabbi Nechemia, Kulu Svirlahu, Maimer Koine Kinyan Gomer. All of these Manda Amrim, all these four Manda Amrim hold that Maimer is Koine Kinyan Gomer. And we're going to see that they don't all hold exactly the same thing, but they all hold that Maimer has a certain severity to it, all in their own way. Rabbi Gamliel Hada Amar, Rabbi Gamliel, we learned over here, Ein Maimer Acher Maimer. The fact that there's Ein Maimer Acher Maimer shows that the first Maimer had a real impact. Because if it had no impact, then the second Maimer would have had an impact. So that there you see how Rabbi Gamliel manifests this concept that Maimer is Koine Kinyan Gomer. Beishamai did not. Beishamai we had as well. Shloisha Achen, if there were three brothers, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Shnayim Esuin L'shtei Achoyos. Reuben and Shimon were married to two sisters. The Achas Mufna, and Levi was not married to anybody related there. Meis Echad Bal Achoyos. Now Reuben dies. So Shimon cannot do Yibam on Reuben's Almana because Shimon is married to her sister. So who's going to do the Maimer? But also Mufna Maimer. So Levi now did Maimer on Reuben's Almana, on Almana A. Now Shimon dies. So now he did Maimer on Almana A. Almana B fell to him from Shimon, but Almana B is Almana A's sister. So what do you do? The Shami Armin, we had this case several times. The Shami Armin Ishtar Imoy. The woman who he did Maimer on remains by him. And we look at Shimon's Almana, the second sister who fell to him, as Achois Ishtar. Well, that clearly shows that the Maimer had a real impact, right? The Maimer must have had a real impact because when he made Maimer on Reuben's Almana, we consider it Mamish his wife, enough that the other woman doesn't even need Chalitza because we consider it like Chalitza. Rab Shimon, where do you see Rab Shimon holds of this concept that Maimer is powerful? The Tanya, Amul Rab Shimon Chachamim, here was a case where you had two brothers who survived the deceased brother. But the two brothers were Katanim. They were only 9 years old. So their Bia is considered like a Suffolk Bia. And what happened is one of these 9-year-olds had Bia with the Almana, and then the second 9-year-old had Bia with the Almana. And the question is, what is the status of this Almana? So Rab Shimon said, in Bia's Rishon Bia, if the Bia of the first child is a Bia, then Bia Sheni ain't a Bia. Then the Bia of the second one is not a Bia at all. But in Bia's Rishon ain't a Bia. If you don't consider the first child's Bia a Bia, then Bia Sheni Nami ain't a Bia. Now, Zok Gemara, Bia's Ben Tasha, the Chemaimer Shavu Rabban. We know that the Rabbanon consider the Bia of a cotton, they consider that to be just like Maimer. The Kamar Rab Shimon ain't a Bia. And Rab Shimon said that the second Bia, if the first Bia is considered a Bia, then the second Bia ain't a Bia at all. So you see on the tzad that we consider his Bia to be like a Maimer, it's enough that the second Bia will have no impact on this Yevam at all. Once again, you see a certain strength in Maimer that it could push off another attempt at Bia, at Yibam. And Ben Azai, where do you see Ben Azai holds of the concept of a strong Maimer? Ben Azai Omer, Yesh Maimer Acher Maimer, Vishnei Yevamin, the Yevama Achas. Ben Azai holds that there is Maimer Acher Maimer when there's two Yevamin. So if there's Almana A and Almana B, then Maimer does work on both women. But the Ein Maimer Acher Maimer, Vishnei Yevamos, the Yavam Echad. But if there's two Yevamos, if there's two men and only one woman, then you'll say Yesh Maimer Acher Maimer. But if there's two women and only one man, then you say Ein Maimer Acher Maimer. So you see, in a case of two women and one man, Ein Maimer Acher Maimer. Again, you see a certain strength to Maimer. Reb Nechemia, the Tanya, Reb Nechemia Omer, Achas be'ila, the Achas chalitza, bein betchila, bein be'enza, bein b'soif. This was the Reb Nechemia at the end of our Mishnah. Ein acharei klum. Frank the Gemara. Well, be a psula, the chemaimer should be rabbanon. We said a minute ago that anytime there's a bia psula, whether it's bentesha, or in this case, it's a bia psula because it was done after a get, it's only considered like maimer. Because Tani einacharei klum. Rabbi Nechemia holds einacharei klum. So you see the bia has a strength. So you see maimer has a strength. So again, these aren't mamish that they all hold the same, but you see in each of them a certain chaymer to what maimer does. Okay, we'll stop here.
It's like a new law. We never went into children having via 9 years old. You know, we had illegitimate unions